King Charles just laid Donald Trump out in front of the entire world during a joint session of the United States Congress. And King Charles did it without even mentioning Donald Trump's name once. Instead, King Charles spoke about the system of checks and balances and how the executive branch must function in coordination with and as countered by other branches in the United States government. King Charles talked about the importance of NATO and why NATO needs to support Ukraine. King Charles talked about how the word of the United States is important. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth just cracked under pressure during his testimony before the House Armed Services Committee. He was flailing, he was yelling, he was looking like a cornered rat. Let me show you what went down during this pitch-perfect cross-examination of Hegseth. First, you had Democratic Congress member Carbajal cross-examine Hegseth and also pointing out just how incompetent Hegseth is. Here, play this clip.
Mr. Hegseth, I stand by what I said last time you were here. You were incompetent then, you're incompetent now, and you're the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to incompetence. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, not
other than that, I'm doing great. Thank you.
Next, you had Democratic Congresswoman Houlihan cross-examine Hegseth as he refused to say why General Randy George, the former Army Chief of Staff, was fired via text message by Hegseth. Here, play this clip.
So I will move on, sir, and I'm going to reclaim my time. General George, let's talk about a guy who's a patriot. Somebody who every single person here in this dais and down there in that audience and out there in this world has huge admiration for. Why did he get fired?
Well, as with any moves we make with general officers, first of all, I thank them for their service. And ultimately,
my impression is you thanked him by a text or a phone call. You didn't even do it to his face.
Out of respect for these officers, we never talk about the nature of their removal, but every one of them, including myself, knows that they serve at the pleasure of the president.
Him?
Ultimately, out of respect to these officers, we don't reveal it. However, I will note, it's very difficult to change the culture of a department that was been destroyed by the wrong perspectives.
So you think General George destroyed a culture?
There are many, we've gotten rid of many general officers in this administration because we need new leadership.
Sir. You have no way of explaining why you fired one of the most decorated and remarkable men who's
we
ever
needed
served
new
the
leadership.
Nation.
That's
and
my
so
answer.
your answer is a very immature way of responding to my request.
Hit subscribe. You may think that you're subscribed, but double check that you're actually subscribed and help us hit 7 million subscribers.
Here is a sentence that should shake you to your core. On April 28, 2026, a foreign monarch stood before the elected representatives of the United States Congress, was greeted with a roaring standing ovation, and then proceeded to deliver, sentence by sentence, reference by reference, paragraph by carefully constructed paragraph, one of the most pointed and surgically precise rebukes of a sitting American president that this country has witnessed in living memory. He never said the name Donald Trump. He did not have to, because every single word King Charles III spoke in that chamber was a mirror held up to this moment in American history, and in that mirror you could see exactly what this country has become, exactly what it is losing, and exactly what it still has the power to reclaim. This is USA Press. Welcome. And tonight, we are going to take you through every layer of what happened in that chamber on Capitol Hill, why it matters more than any headline has yet captured, and what it connects to in the broader war being waged right now against the institutions, the people, and the organizations that stand between this administration and the unchecked power it has been reaching for since the very first day it returned to Washington.
And matters and the weight with which it carries should always be of paramount import, which there were then audible groans in the audience. Obviously, he was talking about the fact that Donald Trump has undermined the weight of what it means when the United States speaks. And there was even more than that. Let me show you what went down during this joint session. And I think you'll see how King Charles really was able to call Trump out in his own way. So here is where King Charles talks about the word of America carrying weight throughout the world. In other words, stop lying about every damn thing, Donald. Here, play this clip.
America's words carry weight and meaning, as they have since independence. the actions of this great nation matter even more.
Then King Charles talked about the United States Supreme Court Historical Society and how it calculated that the Magna Carta is cited in at least 160 Supreme Court cases regarding the principles of executive power is subject to checks and balances. What do you think he's talking about here? Here, play this clip.
Roots go even further back in history. The U.S. Supreme Court Historical Society has calculated that Magna Carta is cited in at least 160 Supreme Court cases since 1789, not least as the foundation of the principle that executive power is subject to checks and balances.
Further, during the cross-examination by Congresswoman Houlihan, Hegseth refused to say how many more months would be required to conclude the catastrophic and disastrous war in Iran. Play this clip.
Despite the fact that your recent comments indicate that operations appear to be finished, it's clear there clearly is more work that needs to be done. As mentioned, today is indeed 60 days. So, Mr. Secretary, how many more months, just order of magnitude, do you think that you're going to need to be able to conclude operations successfully? And how many more billions of dollars do you think you're going to ask this body for?
Well, as you know, and as the president has stated, you would never tell your adversary, especially
Sir, I
once
recognize
you've,
that is the line that you always
especially
use,
once
but
you've
give me an order of
decimated their
magnitude.
military and you control their
3X,
strait,
4X?
how long you would be committed to the mission.
Next, Democratic Congressmember Vindman cross-examined Hegseth and said, so Hegseth, are you blaming your daddy now for this war? Trump's your daddy. You blaming daddy? Here, play this clip.
For President Trump, overwhelmingly, they voted for that
I got
position.
that, but the president ordered the strike. Is that correct?
Which strike are you referring to?
The strike on Iran, the war that we're in.
Oh, of course. I mean,
Okay.
he's the commander in
So
chief. He's
it
made
sounds like
the calls.
It sounds like you're blaming daddy for the mess we're in, and I don't think he's going to be particularly happy with you.
I see what you're trying to do. There's no daylight in this administration on this
Mr. Secretary,
campaign,
I'm asking
and I'm
the
happy
questions. You've been
to
admonished
stand
for this
shoulder to shoulder
before.
with this
You're
administration.
claiming my time.
More from Democratic Congressmember Vindman here as well, saying, you believe that the American people voted for this catastrophic war in Iran? That's what you testified to during your opening statement? Watch this. Play this clip.
Close. And so I just want to kind of give you the state of play right now. It's been 2 months of war. We have hopes for a resolution, but the war continues, really. Iran has closed the strait, and we've now gone in and blockaded their ports. 1/5 of the world's oil is unable to transit the strait, and the American people and the department are paying significantly more. And you also said that this is what the American people actually voted for. But actually, the American people voted for a promise not to get into Middle Eastern wars. And they voted for lower prices. And this is the exact opposite of what they got. So let me ask you this. The president ordered the strike. Is that correct?
The president's been saying for over 30 years that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. So he's been very clear as a position. When the American people voted for President Trump overwhelmingly, they voted for that position.
I got that. But the president ordered the strike. Is that correct?
And then we heard this cross-examination from Democratic Congressmember Goodlander, and she was saying, so do you agree with the statement that the military should not follow unlawful orders? And then Hegseth is like, what a partisan talking point that is. Here, play this clip.
Of American law that our service members follow lawful orders and lawful orders only. Is that right? Do you agree with the statement, quote, the military won't follow unlawful orders?
I do.
Mr. Hegseth, do you agree with that statement?
I do, but understand what you're insinuating
Thank you.
in a partisan point.
I'm not. I'm actually quoting you directly, Mr. Hegseth, from April 12th, 2016. And I appreciate that on the record, you've clarified this important principle of American law.
Gentlelady's time's expired.
Before Charles said anything else, before he invoked history or quoted founding documents or praised the bond between the United States and the United Kingdom, he made a statement that was so simple and so direct that it took a moment to absorb its full weight. He said that the word of the United States, the promise of this country, the commitments this nation makes to its allies, to international institutions, to the principles it claims to uphold, carries weight and meaning in the world. He did not say it had always lived up to that weight. He said it should. He said the world depends on it. And he said this while standing in a building occupied by a Congress that has watched an administration systematically undermine those very commitments, break faith with NATO allies, walk away from Ukraine, destabilize trade relationships built over decades, and treat the word of the United States as a bargaining chip to be traded away on social media at 3 in the morning. The word of America, Charles was saying to every man and woman in that chamber, is not Donald Trump's personal currency. It belongs to history. It belongs to all the people who died defending it. Handle it with care. Charles opened his address with a quote from the Irish poet Oscar Wilde, a man imprisoned by the British state for the crime of being gay, who wrote that we have everything in common with America nowadays, except, of course, language.
Next, King Charles talks about how in the immediate aftermath of September 11th, when NATO invoked Article 5, NATO was there for the United States. They were there with the United States in Afghanistan, and that moment and other moments with NATO have defined a shared experience and how NATO needs to be strong and how NATO needs to support Ukraine. This, as Donald Trump has invited Putin to the G20 in Miami at a Trump property in December. This, as Trump continues to attack Ukraine. It's clear what King Charles was saying here and who it was directed to. Let's play this clip.
In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, when NATO invoked Article 5 for the first time, and the United Nations Security Council was united in the face of terror, we answered the call together, as our people have done so for more than a century, shoulder to shoulder, through 2 world wars, the Cold War, Afghanistan, and moments that have defined our shared security. Today, Mr. Speaker, that same unyielding resolve is needed for the defense of Ukraine and her most courageous people. It is needed in order to secure a truly just and lasting peace.
Next up, Democratic Congress member Moulton, a veteran himself, was cross-examining Hegseth. Hegseth was standing by his no quarter statement, which is a war crime, where Hegseth said that if in a war people are surrendering, you are allowed to kill them and show them no quarter. Watch this cross-examination by Moulton. Here, play this clip.
Now, quickly, on March 13th in a press conference, you said, we will give them no quarter, no mercy. In order for no quarter or no survivors is a war crime under the Geneva Conventions. You understand that's murder. Do you stand by that statement?
The Department of War fights to win, and we ensure that our warfighters have the rules of engagement necessary to be as effective
Okay, so
as
just to
humanly
be clear,
possible.
you called
which they are.
Democratic members of Congress to be tried for sedition for reminding our troops to follow the law. But when you tell them to commit a war crime, you stand by yourself.
For insinuating that the laws
Congratulations,
that we're
Mr.
giving them are unlawful.
More cross-examination from Moulton right here. Let's play it.
Okay, so let's
Just imagine.
which, by the way,
if they had one,
every
which the
previous
Obama deal was
administration,
going to allow them to
including
do.
the first Trump administration,
If they had one.
prevented them from having a nuclear weapon. So listen, how is this war going? Do you think we're winning?
Militarily on the battlefield, it's been an astounding military success.
No, but are we winning the war?
Absolutely.
Okay, so do you call Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz winning?
Well, I would say the blockade that we hold that doesn't allow anything to come in or out of Iranian ports.
Okay, so we've blockaded their blockade. So they blockaded us, and then we blockaded their blockade. That's like saying, tag, you're it. Or, if President Madison had said, well, the British just burned down Washington, but don't worry, we're going to burn it down as well.
And we heard from another veteran on this committee, Democratic Congressmember DeLuzio from the Pittsburgh region. Watch his cross-examination of Hegseth right here. Play this clip.
About this earlier. You said in, I think, your press conference, essentially, and I'll quote you here, no quarter, no mercy for our enemies. That's the end of the quote. Is your guidance that you expect our troops in harm's way if there's a foreign enemy surrendering, laying down their arms, they're supposed to provide no quarter and kill them?
You denied it, but you were indeed trying to take the chairman to a partisan place. That was General Milley. That was the previous administration, which played politics. We don't play that
It's a simple question. I'm asking you what you meant.
We fight to win, and we ensure the rules of engagements are such that our troops have every authority possible to.
I'll give you another chance. In saying that, are you trying to tell commanders that that's what you expect? You're in the chain of command. It's a simple question.
I understand that. My commanders know exactly what the guidance is with each and every mission, and they know every tool.
Secretary,
every tool
in
at
refusing
to,
to answer it, I think you speak volumes. I think that's a dangerous thing. We all know the expectations. We know the law of war. We know what is lawful. I'd expect our commanders to understand that as well. I yield back, Mr.
And then another veteran, Democratic Congress member Ryan, was cross-examining Hegseth. Watch what went down. Let's play this clip.
Let's
maximize across the theater.
Let's talk about what defenses they had. Prior to the attack, officers on the ground knew our troops were vulnerable. In fact, they requested additional force protection. Did they receive it?
Wherever humanly possible, force protection and counter UAS was always made available.
They did not. In fact, when asked to describe the base's defense, one survivor who's come forward from the unit said, quote, I would put it in the none category. From a drone defense capability, none. So let's be clear, no counter drone capabilities, no counter rocket systems, no counter mortar or counter artillery, not even the basic overhead protection that you and I had 20 years ago in Iraq. And now 6 of our soldiers are dead. The next day, you downplayed the attack. You said it was a squirter that squeaked through fortified defenses. But since then, thankfully, brave survivors have come forward to set the record straight. One of our surviving soldiers told CBS, quote, painting a picture that one squeaked through is a falsehood. Another said the unit was, quote, unprepared to provide any defense for itself. It was not a fortified position. Another survivor said the building's protection was about as weak as one gets. Secretary Hegseth, that is obviously in direct contradiction to what you said from the Pentagon podium the next day. So are you saying that these soldiers, our soldiers who survived this horrific attack, are lying?
What I'm saying is before the commencement of the conflict, we put in maximum defensive posture we could.
That's a direct contradiction.
We moved 70
to what they said.
In this directing. Can I speak, or are you just going to monologue falsehoods all over the place?
It's not a falsehood.
We moved 7,500 troops off of the X based on the intel.
Stop.
Based on the intel.
Stop. Reclaiming my time.
Because you yell doesn't make you right. Just because you yell doesn't make you right.
I'm reclaiming my time on behalf of these survivors. You just said what they said is a falsehood.
There's a much larger picture. There's a much larger picture at play here that included integrated air defenses, bunkers, moving people off the X
why, Mr. Secretary,
to ensure that they were not part of the target. We moved those troops and all across the theater, thousands of troops off the X, off of their bases, because we knew what Iran was going to try to strike, and we knew there could be a tragic moment. There could be a tragic moment where something could get through. Of course, that's the consequence of conflict, and we remember those 6 every single day.
I want to finish.
But don't play games with.
I'm not playing games. I want to finish with one more quote from a survivor of the attack, and I put this on the record. Telling the truth is important, and we're not going to learn from these mistakes if we pretend these mistakes didn't happen.
It was a warm, self-deprecating joke that immediately won the crowd. But the choice of wild was not accidental. Oscar Wilde was a man persecuted by his government for who he was, for refusing to conform, for insisting that the truth of his inner life had more value than the comfort of those in power. In a country where an administration has spent the last year dismantling every protection for LGBTQ+ Americans it can legally reach, opening a speech about American values with a quote from Oscar Wilde was a statement. It was quiet, it was plausibly deniable, and it was absolutely deliberate. Then came the passage that stopped the chamber cold. Charles spoke about the founding of America, about the boldness of the men who declared independence 250 years ago, about how they balanced contending forces and drew strength in diversity to build a nation from 13 disparate colonies. He then drew a direct and unbroken line from the Magna Carta, signed in England in 1215, the foundational document establishing that even a king is subject to the law, through English common law, through the Declaration of Rights of 1689, and directly into the American Bill of Rights of 1791. He told those assembled lawmakers that the principles in their own founding documents did not appear from nowhere. They were inherited, they were passed down, and they carry with them a responsibility that transcends any one president, any one term, any one election. He noted that the U.S. Supreme Court Historical Society has found that the Magna Carta has been cited in at least 160 Supreme Court cases since 1789. And then he said the line that brought the entire chamber to its feet, that the Magna Carta stands as the foundation of the principle that executive power is subject to checks and balances. The room erupted. Both sides of the aisle applauded. Democrats leapt to their feet. And some Republicans who had been sitting with arms folded, who had spent the previous year voting to confirm a cabinet packed with loyalists and cronies, who had watched their president defy court orders and fire prosecutors and weaponize federal agencies against his political enemies. Even some of those Republicans began to clap. Because to sit on your hands when a king cites the Magna Carta in defense of checks and balances in the middle of a national television broadcast with your constituents watching, that is a political step too far, even for the most devoted Trump loyalist. And Charles knew that. This man has been preparing to be king his entire life. He understood the politics of that moment. He chose those words knowing exactly what they would do, and he delivered them with the calm authority of a man who answers to no electorate and fears no primary. But here is what you need to understand about that moment. The standing ovation for checks and balances did not happen in a vacuum. It happened on the same day that the White House was pursuing new import tariffs specifically designed to circumvent a Supreme Court ruling. It happened while the administration was continuing its campaign to fire prosecutors it deemed insufficiently loyal to the president. It happened while judges across the country were issuing rulings that the executive branch was either ignoring, appealing on bad faith grounds, or actively undermining through delay and obstruction.
Next, as Donald Trump continues to attack the Pope, as Donald Trump posts AI images of himself as Jesus, as Donald Trump demeans religion. Again, whether you're religious or not, I always say here on this network, that's not a focus of this network. Whether you're religious, no religion, just be a good person. In any event, King Charles says, look, we need to respect the Christian faith. It's an anchor of daily inspiration. And again, who do you think this is directed at? I don't know. Maybe the guy who attacks the Pope every day and does AI images of himself as Jesus? Here, play this clip.
And, Mr. Speaker, for many here, and for myself, the Christian faith is a firm anchor and daily inspiration that guides us, not only personally, that guides us not only personally, but together as members of our community. Having devoted a large part of my life to interfaith relationships and greater understanding, it is that faith in the triumph of light over darkness which I have found confirmed countless times. Through it, I am inspired by the profound respect that develops as people of different faiths grow in their understanding of each other. It is why, it is my hope, my prayer, that in these turbulent times, working together and with our international partners, we can stem the beating of plowshares into swords.
And then there was this other brilliant moment where the cameraman immediately switched from King Charles to EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, following this line from King Charles, as Rupert puts it. Here, play this clip.
As we celebrate the beauty that surrounds us, our generation must decide how to address the collapse of critical natural systems, which threatens far more than the harmony and essential diversity of nature. We ignore at our peril the fact that these natural systems, in other words, nature's own economy, provide the foundation for our prosperity and our national security.
Secretary Hegseth, those soldiers told the truth. Those soldiers are braver than you are.
I commend them.
They are asking for accountability. They deserve accountability. And I'm asking for the same, starting with you. And as I said a year ago, you need to resign immediately.
I commend those soldiers.
I yield back.
More cross-examination from Democratic Congressmember DeLuzio right here. Let's play it.
Secretary, you heard direct quotes from some of them via CBS's reporting. They were willing to talk to the press. Things like they were unprepared to provide any defense for themselves in the unit. Things like we were moved closer to Iran, to a deeply unsafe area that was a known target. Your spokesperson, Sean Parnell, in response to that reporting, said it was not true. Do you agree with that? He was calling these guys liars?
I'm not calling our troops liars, and I don't know if what you're representing is correct or not. I'll take you at your word on that. But all I know is that we took every effort possible at the commencement of this campaign to ensure the defense of our troops, to include moving them off of known bases to places that were not known. And we had intel.
Understood,
intel
Secretary.
Were not known, and then those were fortified with bunkers and other fortifications with theater air defenses. Was our concern that something could
I'm going to pause you there. I'm going to give you a chance.
Absolutely.
Secretary, I'm going to
you're
give you a
disparaging
chance.
me that I don't care.
I'm
about
asking
the
you whether you
passing
think they're
of-
liars or not.
You
That's what I asked
you
you.
are disparaging me that I don't care about the passing of our troops.
Nope.
That
I asked
think
if you
our
thought
troops
they're
are-
liars, Secretary.
That's disparaging and
reclaim my
smearing
time.
in every way. Nobody cares more about the fate of our troops. Nobody cares
Mr.
about the
Mr.
health of our troops.
Mr. Secretary,
Nobody wants to bring them all hope
Mr.
more than I.
Secretary, I understand, but he controls the time. He controls the time. You get to control your answer. And the gentleman's
If we're allowed to answer.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Secretary, my question was clear, whether you thought they were liars or not. You don't seem to want to answer it. We can move on.
Then under questioning by the ranking member on this committee, Democratic Congressmember Smith, finally, a DOD official in the Trump regime admits that the Iran war has already cost at least $25 billion. Let's play this clip.
Drag you into the conversation here. We have not yet received from the Pentagon the costs of the war. So just for the record, we'd like to get that as soon as possible. Certainly the munitions expended, but also underreported is we've had a fair amount of equipment destroyed, including 2 C-130s with the rescue of our downed airmen. So do you have either A, a cost estimate coming to us anytime soon, or B, a specific supplemental request?
Thank you for that question. So approximately at this day, we're spending about $25 billion on Operation Epic Fury. Most of that is munitions. There's part of that is obviously O&M and equipment replacement. We will formulate a supplemental through the White House that will come to Congress once we have a full assessment of the cost of the conflict.
Sure. So you're saying the full cost at this point is $25 billion?
Yeah, that's our estimate for the cost.
Okay. Interesting, because I'm glad you answered that question, because we've been asking for a hell of a long time and no one's given us the number. So if you could get those details over to us, that would be great.
More cross-examination right here from Congressmember Smith. And you'll see that Hegseth really ran into trouble throughout this cross-examination. He claimed that Iran's nuclear facilities were obliterated, but then when Smith pointed out, well, how are they obliterated, but you claim that their nuclear capabilities posed an imminent threat, to which Hegseth then compared to, well, they have nuclear ambitions. Their ambitions were an imminent threat, but they had all of these conventional ballistic and cruise missiles like North Korea. Well, Hegseth, thanks for bringing up North Korea, where Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un exchanged love letters, and Kim Jong-un ultimately was able to build nuclear weapons. And now he's apparently bragging about producing 10 nuclear warheads like a month and building the largest nuclear arsenal. But because Donald Trump's so utterly pathetic and because our media is so compliant, nobody really talks about that other than independent media and us here at the Mice Touch Network leading the way. Here, play this clip.
Who's hell-bent on getting a nuclear weapon and get them to a point where they're at the table giving it up in a way that
so they
never have it.
So they haven't broken yet. Okay, we haven't gotten there yet for all of the.
Well, their nuclear facilities have been obliterated. Underground, they're buried, and we're watching them 24/7. So we know where any nuclear material
reclaiming
might be.
my time for
we're
just
watching
a quick second here. We had to start this war, you just said, 60 days ago, because the nuclear weapon was an imminent threat. Now you're saying that it was completely obliterated?
They had not given up their nuclear ambitions, and they had a conventional shield of thousands of missiles.
So Operation Midnight Hammer accomplished nothing of substance. It left us at exactly the same place we were before. So much so
their
that
facilities were bombed
war.
and obliterated. Their ambitions continued, and they're building a conventional shield.
Right, let me try again.
It's the North Korea strategy. You know this very well. The North Korea strategy was use conventional missiles to prevent anybody from challenging them, so they could slow walk their way to a weapon. President Trump saw Iran at its weakest moment, took an action to ensure, in a way that only the United States of America could do with our Israeli partners,
and yet
to ensure their
conventional
shield was brought
one
to
other
deal,
question,
which we've done.
if I could get to it.
More cross-examination here from Democratic Congress member Adam Smith of Hegseth, where Smith's like, how are you just so wrong on Ukraine? Right? 14 months ago, didn't you say that Ukraine was going to be completely conquered by Russia, so they better make the best deal they could? Like, you're objectively don't know what you're talking about. How do you square that? To which Hegseth's like, Joe Biden. Oh, Joe Biden? What does Joe Biden have to do with any of it? It makes no sense. Here, play this clip.
So on Ukraine, a year plus ago, your advice, the president's advice, was Ukraine had no cards to play. They should go cut the best possible deal they could. Clearly, that was wrong. What did you miss? What did you miss about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine that you didn't see that Ukraine was going to be capable of doing what they've done in the last 14 months?
What we didn't miss, and we're here in this committee, is that Joe Biden, with no accountability, gave hundreds of billions of dollars of our weapons to Ukraine, to an outcome that never would have happened if President Trump was president. So he pulled out you guys don't talk about that. Ultimately, President Trump believes there should be a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine.
But you didn't expect Ukraine to be where they're at right now. I'm asking you, just from a strategic standpoint,
I think the Ukrainians have shown great courage, and I appreciate that Europe is now paying for any weapons that we provide.
All right, I yield back. Thank you.
The men and women who applauded checks and balances in that chamber on April 28th had, in many cases, voted to weaken those very checks, confirmed the very officials dismantling those very balances, and stood silent while the architecture of American democracy was being hollowed out, brick by brick. Charles held up the mirror. The question is whether anyone in that room was ready to look honestly at what they saw. If this video is giving you the kind of analysis you have been looking for, please subscribe to USA Press right now and hit that notification bell. We do not take corporate money. We do not have sponsors pulling our strings. We tell these stories because they matter and because you deserve to hear them fully told. Hit like if you are with us. From checks and balances, Charles moved to the global stage, and here his message was equally unambiguous. He spoke about NATO, the alliance that has kept the peace in Europe for more than 75 years, the alliance that Donald Trump has spent 2 terms publicly disdaining, threatening to abandon, and using as leverage in deals that benefit nobody but Vladimir Putin. Charles did not attack Trump on NATO in crude or combative terms. He did something far more effective. He reminded Congress of what NATO actually is. He invoked September 11, 2001, a wound so deep in the American psyche that no politician in that room could remain unmoved by its mention. He recalled that after those attacks, it was the entire NATO alliance that invoked Article 5, the mutual defense provision, for the first and only time in the alliance's history. It was the United Kingdom that sent its military to fight alongside Americans in Afghanistan. It was Europe that stood with America in its darkest hour, not because it was required to, but because it chose to. And then Charles looked directly at House Speaker Mike Johnson, seated behind him on the dais, and he delivered a line that will be quoted for years. The same unyielding resolve shown after September 11th, he said, is needed today for the defense of Ukraine and her most courageous people. That sentence was not addressed to Democrats. It was addressed specifically and personally to the Speaker of a Republican-controlled House that has stalled, delayed, debated, and defunded American support for a democratic nation being torn apart by Russian aggression. It was addressed to a political party whose most powerful members have repeated Kremlin talking points on national television, who have questioned why America should care about Ukraine, who have allowed an administration to cozy up to Putin while a European country bleeds. Charles was reminding them, you know what it feels like to need your allies. You know what it means when they show up. Be the ally you needed. The silence in the chamber after those words was not the silence of people who hadn't heard. It was the silence of people who had. He did not stop there. Charles spoke about the shared responsibility of the United States and the United Kingdom to protect the natural world, to steward the environment that underpins both national security and economic prosperity. He spoke about melting Arctic ice caps as a national security threat, a direct counter to an administration that has not only withdrawn from climate agreements but actively suppressed the scientific findings of its own federal agencies on the subject. He spoke about nature and ecosystems not in the language of liberal environmentalism, but in the language of survival and strategy. When he reached that section, the Republican side of the chamber went notably quiet. Speaker Johnson, who had been visibly enthusiastic earlier in the address, offered a more muted response. Because there are limits, apparently, to bipartisan applause, and protecting the planet from catastrophic warming sits just beyond those limits for the party of the fossil fuel industry. Then came the faith passage. And this is where Charles demonstrated the most sophisticated understanding of American politics that any visiting foreign leader has shown in years. He did not ignore religion. He leaned into it. He acknowledged directly, addressing Speaker Johnson by name, that for many in that chamber, and for himself, the Christian faith is a firm anchor and daily inspiration. He spoke about Easter, about the season of hope, about the triumph of light over darkness. He spoke about his own life's work in interfaith dialogue, about the profound respect that grows when people of different faiths genuinely try to understand one another. And then he said something extraordinary. He expressed his hope, his prayer, that in these turbulent times, working together with international partners, they can stem the beating of plowshares into swords. That is a biblical inversion.
Now, right as this speech was taking place, Donald Trump thought it wise to post an attack against Germany. Donald Trump posted, the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, thinks it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. He doesn't know what he's talking about. If Iran had a nuclear weapon, the whole world would be held hostage. I am doing something with Iran right now that other nations or presidents should have done long ago. No wonder Germany is doing so poorly, both economically and otherwise. Donald J. Trump. This is the part where King Charles says, your words carry weight when you make lies like this about the German chancellor, about the economic condition of Germany. Your word doesn't carry any weight when you say that things are going well in your negotiations with Iran and Iran doesn't even want to speak to you. Your words no longer carry weight. Speaking of executive branch power, which was a theme of King Charles' speech. As the speech was taking place, we learned that James Comey was indicted for a second time by Trump's DOJ. This time, Comey was indicted on charges based on a social media post. Remember when MAGA was like, we think that the UK is an authoritarian state for prosecuting people based on social media posts? And there, the UK prosecuted someone who was making like actual threats on social media and off social media, far right-wing, extremist, hateful, insightful speech. Well, here, Comey's allegedly being prosecuted for a social media post he made in May 2025, where he posted a picture of shells on the beach that spelled 8647. MAGA influencers like Jack Posobiec and others previously posted things like 8646 as it related to former President Biden. But now the Trump regime is trying to tie Comey's May 2025 post with the alleged incident at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, because as the Trump regime covers up the Epstein files, the catastrophic war, the disastrous economy, they want all the focus on that. And also James Comey's daughter, Maureen Comey, won a big motion in federal court in Manhattan that said her lawsuit against the Trump regime can proceed. So now this indictment, I guess the Trump DOJ is now the social media police. If they don't like what you post on social media, if you hurt their feelings, they come after you. But I go back to King Charles' speech right here, which is the executive branch needs to have a check on its power. Article 1, Article 3, do your damn job. Also, while that speech was taking place, it should be noted that the Southern Poverty Law Center filed a motion in order to disclose the secret grand jury proceedings because they say all the things the Trump regime said about them was an utter lie. They said, for example, you had Todd Blanche said that when the Southern Poverty Law Center worked with informants, that they never shared the information with the Alabama police and they never shared it with other police departments. And the Southern Poverty Law Center says, well, of course we shared it. Where do you think they got their information from? Did you lie to the grand jury about everything to secure this indictment? Think about that, because that's probably what they did with Comey as well. That's what they do with Abrego. That's what they did with all of these people. And we heard from Democratic Congress member Ro Khanna, who questioned Hegseth about the costs of this war. And Hegseth just found it funny. Hegseth was laughing that you and all the American people out there and people throughout the world are suffering economically because of Donald Trump and this despicable war. Play this clip.
How much did it cost American taxpayers in terms of the strike to the Iranian school where kids were killed? Do you have that number in terms of the missiles we used?
As I've said, that unfortunate situation remains under investigation.
You don't know how much it costs the taxpayer,
but I wouldn't tie a cost to that, to anything.
It's a reasonable question, no, sir? I mean, our taxpayer money was going there. Do you know how much it will cost Americans in terms of their increased cost in gas and food over the next year because of the Iran war?
I would simply ask you what the cost is of an Iranian nuclear bomb.
I'm going to give you that opportunity.
I would simply ask you what the... you're playing gotcha questions about domestic things. I'm not...
You're saying it's a gotcha question to ask what it's going to be in terms of the increased cost of gas.
Why won't you answer what it costs to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear bomb?
I give you that, sir, but let me...
What would it cost? What would you pay to ensure Iran doesn't get a nuclear bomb? What would you pay?
I reclaim my time. Do you not know? You had no one do the analysis of what the increased cost of gas and food on the American people are going to be?
What is the cost of Iran holding that straight at issue with nuclear weapons?
It's $631 billion, which means it's an increase of $5,000 a year for American households. Now, let me give you this point. You're saying that your operation is preventing a nuclear Iran. Will you acknowledge that there is an economic cost to the American people for doing what you believe is necessary to make Iran denuclear? Will you acknowledge the economic cost?
We have an incredible economic team that's managing this better than what the previous administration did to our economy, what the previous administration did with inflation,
you know what's upsetting? I reclaim my time.
With COVID, and you're going to lecture this administration about the economy?
You know what is upsetting?
Incredible.
You didn't even do the analysis on how much it's costing the American people. It's one thing if you said, okay, it costs the American people $5,000, but we think it's worth it. That's what we've done in World War II and other wars. Here's what it costs. You got to pay for it. You don't even know what the average American is paying. You don't know what we paid in terms of the missiles that hit the Iranian school. You don't know what we're paying in terms of gas. You don't know what we're paying in terms of food. Your 25 billion number is totally off. It's the incompetence.
You think that's a gotcha question? Hey, ask the Americans right now who can't afford gas, can't afford groceries, whose house may just about to be in foreclosure, who may be evicted. Tell them that's a gotcha question, Hegseth. More cross-examination here from Ro Khanna. Let's play it.
Because you said you wouldn't get us into bad wars. You said you would bring down the prices. You know what I'm sad for? I'm sad for all the people who voted for Trump. I'm sad for them because you betrayed them. You betrayed a lot of that MAGA base. And you know who knows that? J.D. Vance knows that.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Then under some questioning from Congresswoman Takuda, Hegseth said that Los Angeles would have been on fire last summer if the military didn't intervene. We would have been on fire here. I'm in Los Angeles. We would not have been on fire. We were perfectly beautiful. We didn't need you here. In fact, you made things horrible like you did throughout the rest of the country, you fascists. Here, play this clip.
50 years ago. Okay, very good.
All right. Well, Secretary Hegseth, if President Trump ordered you to deploy troops to polling places during the midterm elections this fall, which would violate the law I just cited, would you implement his order? Yes or no?
What you're trying to insinuate is that the president would give unlawful orders and we would somehow deploy troops as a result. And the evidence of our department is that we've worked alongside law enforcement very effectively for 15 months. Los Angeles would have been on fire for the summer had we not come across.
I humbly disagree with that, but this is not a hypothetical situation that I'm inferring on. Your president in January of this year told the New York Times that he regretted not ordering the National Guard to seize voting machines in key states after the 2020 election.
More questioning from Takuda right here. Let's play this clip.
Of voting places was 250 years ago. We're talking 2020. So if the president, again, I'm asking you, orders you to break election law, violate the Constitution and the law, would you follow the orders of the president? Yes or no?
The president, you like to insinuate that the president issues
It's a simple question.
And does not.
Who would you follow, the president or the Constitution?
I will note that in 2024, troops were that was Joe Biden, by the way. Joe Biden were deployed to polling locations in 15 states. 2024, Joe Biden, troops deployed to polling locations in 15 states. Explain that one to me.
I am asking you a question now. You seem to really like Joe Biden. You've brought his name up more than many other topics today. Answer the question.
Really, Hegseth? Biden put the army in polling locations? I mean, these people live in their fake dystopian world that just doesn't exist. And they want us to conform to all of their lies. It's such garbage. They're such garbage humans, these people. More cross-examination from Takuda right here. Let's play it.
Answer the question. Who are you beholden to, Mr. Secretary, the president or the Constitution?
Well,
if you can't answer that question,
very proudly served as president.
When I asked
very
you,
proudly swear an oath to defend the
leg
Constitution
in Los Angeles. He couldn't answer that either. So I think our answer is very clear. Obviously, you have taken a oath of loyalty only to the president and not the people of this country.
Then we got additional questioning from Democratic Congress member Moulton, where Hegseth is asked if he considered the risk of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz ahead of time. Watch his response. Play this clip.
Of military options that are carefully considered with the associated risks with those options and the considerations therein.
So, Mr. Secretary, did you consider this risk?
The original scripture in Isaiah speaks of beating swords into plowshares, of turning weapons into tools of peace. Charles reversed it deliberately. He was saying, we are moving in the wrong direction. We are turning the instruments of peace into weapons. He was saying this in the language of the faith that the Republican Party claims as its defining identity. Because here is the extraordinary tension that Charles was navigating in that room. The Republican Party has spent years wrapping itself in Christianity as a political identity. Donald Trump, who once held a Bible upside down outside a church cleared with tear gas for a photo opportunity, who has sold Bibles, who has called himself the most religious president in American history, that man was watching this speech on television, reportedly jealous of the applause. And the King of England, the head of the Church of England by constitutional role, was standing in his building explaining what Christianity actually requires: compassion, peace, understanding, service to all people regardless of their faith or background. He was explaining that a faith that expresses itself through the exclusion of immigrants, the persecution of minorities, and the demonization of the vulnerable is not a firm anchor. It is a costume. The people in that chamber who wear their faith as a political accessory heard every word. Whether they understood, it is a different question. The speech ended with Charles calling for the two nations to rededicate themselves to one another in the selfless service of our peoples and of all the peoples of the world. He quoted Prime Minister Keir Starmer directly, a man Trump has publicly criticized and clashed with repeatedly, calling the US-UK partnership an indispensable partnership. He said, "We must not disregard everything that has sustained us for the last 80 years. Instead, we must build on it." And the chamber rose one final time. The king had spoken. The mirror had been raised. What happens next is on the people in that room. Now, while all of this was unfolding in the halls of Congress, the courts and the streets of American legal and civic life were erupting with stories that bring the urgency of Charles's message into brutal, immediate focus. Let us turn to the Southern Poverty Law Center and to a story that is as alarming as anything this administration has done to date. The Southern Poverty Law Center, an organization that has spent decades tracking white supremacist groups, hate organizations, neo-Nazi networks, and domestic terrorist movements, was indicted last week by a Trump DOJ grand jury in Alabama on 11 counts of wire fraud, bank fraud, and money laundering. The charges center on the organization's use of paid confidential informants embedded within extremist groups, including the Ku Klux Klan and neo-Nazi organizations. The government's theory, presented to the public by Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche alongside FBI Director Kash Patel in a joint press conference, is that by paying informants within these groups, the SPLC was effectively funding the groups themselves and defrauding its donors in the process. Donald Trump has called the SPLC one of the greatest political scams in American history. The case has been assigned to a Trump-appointed federal judge in Alabama. But here is what the government is not telling you. Here is what the SPLC's lawyers went to court to establish on the very same day King Charles was addressing Congress. The SPLC's use of paid informants was not a secret. It was not hidden from law enforcement. It was, in fact, coordinated with law enforcement across decades of documented cooperation. Before the 2017 white nationalist Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, the rally where Heather Heyer was murdered by a car driven by a white supremacist, the SPLC sent a 45-page intelligence report to the FBI, compiled using information from its informant program, detailing the identities, weapons, and plans of attendees. The organization was helping prevent violence, not enabling it. And the prosecutors who brought these charges knew this. The SPLC sent a letter to DOJ prosecutors on April 17th providing 6 categories of evidence directly negating the charges and requesting that the grand jury be informed of the SPLC's history of working with law enforcement to dismantle extremist operations. The Justice Department did not respond to that letter. It did not present that evidence to the grand jury. It moved forward with the indictment anyway. This is why the SPLC's attorneys filed 2 motions in federal court on April 28th. The first demands disclosure of grand jury transcripts, arguing that the government likely presented false and misleading information to secure the indictment and that the grand jury was not merely misled, but actively weaponized to facilitate such charges. The second demands that Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche retract statements he made on Fox News claiming there was no information that the SPLC had shared informant tips with law enforcement. Statements the SPLC says are demonstrably and knowingly false. The federal magistrate judge ordered the Justice Department to respond to both motions by May 5th. Legal experts across the political spectrum have expressed serious doubts about the validity of these charges. Multiple former prosecutors have described the theory of the case as legally novel at best and constitutionally dangerous at worst. Think about what this means. The Southern Poverty Law Center, a nonprofit organization that has devoted its institutional existence to fighting the Ku Klux Klan, the neo-Nazis, the violent white supremacist movements that have plagued this country since Reconstruction, is now being prosecuted by a federal government that has placed a man formerly linked to those very networks into positions of power, that has pardoned January 6th insurrectionists, that has dismantled the civil rights enforcement apparatus of the federal government. And that has used the word diversity as a slur. And the prosecutor who brought these charges is the same man who was, until recently, Donald Trump's personal criminal defense attorney. Todd Blanche stood at a podium with Kash Patel and announced the indictment of an anti-hate organization as a triumph of law and order. This is not coincidence. This is program. This is a systematic effort to destroy every institutional check on the exercise of raw power that this administration finds inconvenient.
Of course, this department has looked at all aspects of this risk. And
so then why did you
this
send the
department
minesweepers, the only minesweepers we had in the Gulf, to Singapore weeks before the war started?
We have lots of capabilities that you may or may not be aware of at the classified level.
Okay, and
to
so
deal with
by the way,
mines.
would the Trump-class battleships have helped with this?
You're talking about a prospective future battleship, which we welcome in the fleet.
Okay, so you're supportive of the battleships?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Then under questioning from Congresswoman Strickland, Hegseth repeatedly refuses to explain why General Randy George was removed from his position in the middle of the war. Why would you remove a 4-star Army Chief of Staff, one of the most beloved people in our military, if not the most beloved? Were you jealous of him? You pathetic stooge, you. Here, play this clip.
No one is disputing that senior officers serve at the pleasure of civilian leadership. The issue in front of this is whether the decision to remove General Randy George strengthened the Army or created an avoidable disruption during an active operational period. General George, who also served as commanding general at 1st Corps at JBLM, has been serving for 4 decades, including multiple command and operational leadership roles, culminating as Chief of Staff of the Army, responsible for readiness, force modernization, and the welfare of over 1 million soldiers and civilians. He was removed in the middle of an active conflict involving U.S. operations against Iran when leadership continuity is most critical. Public reporting indicates that General George's removal may have followed disagreements over Army personnel matters, including concerns regarding withheld promotions. So my question, Secretary, is this. What specific national security risk, mission risk, or leadership concern did General George present that justified removing him in the middle of a conflict, or was he removed because he challenged some decisions being made?
As I stated earlier, out of respect to these officers, I don't discuss the nature of the removal, but I would ask an earnest question of you. Where does General George fall in the operational chain of command?
So I'm asking you, why did you fire him?
No, but
don't change.
You
the
talked
subject,
about
sir.
you talked about an
Please
operational
answer my
moment.
question.
Where does General
Please
George
answer
fall
my
in
question.
No, it's a simple
National
question.
risk,
You're on the House Armed
mission
Services
risk,
Committee.
Leadership concern. What did he present that justified removing him in the middle of a conflict?
Do you know where General George serves in the operational chain of command?
So I'm asking you my question one more time, sir. Don't try to flip it on me. Why was he removed? Was he a national security risk, mission risk, or leadership concern?
We don't.
Yes or no?
We don't talk about the nature of removals,
don't answer
but
the question.
you
It's
also
all
won't
good.
answer where
So
he
to
is
be
in the
clear,
operational chain of
you
command because
removed
he
the
isn't
Army's
in it. He
Mr.
isn't
I'm gonna
in the
reclaim my
operational
time.
chain of
Gentlelady,
command.
you reclaimed your time.
Yeah, we're going to
You want to tie it to the war, but you don't even know where he is in the chain of command.
some respect.
It's the gentlelady from Washington's time.
Then Congresswoman Jacobs just went off on him. Let's play it.
The same courage that Democrats had. Mr. Secretary, you keep saying that he is the best commander-in-chief we've ever had, the best negotiator.
Talk to the troops.
13 American troops have died. More than 380 have been wounded. The Strait of Hormuz, which was wide open, is now closed. Less than 90% of traffic through the strait is still not going despite the ceasefire. The Iranian regime is still in power. It still has nuclear material. The war is costing Americans billions of dollars. And Mr. Secretary, if you think that this is what winning looks like, then maybe we should be questioning your mental stability. Maybe you are the one responsible for this failure, and the president should think about replacing you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back.
Chair,
I recognize the gentlelady from Virginia, Miss Kiggins.
Hegseth refused to explain Donald Trump's Jesus post. Let's play it.
Well, I want you to know this is not a partisan thing. In fact, many Democrats have had, many Republicans have had these same questions. Marjorie Taylor Greene said he's out of control and he's gone insane. Candace Owens said the 25th Amendment needs to be invoked. Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, who you used to work with, Alex Jones, Stephanie Grisham, the list could go on. So how do I explain to my constituents that while they are in harm's way, their commander-in-chief is posting these unhinged posts?
How did you explain to your constituents what happened on October 7th, or what happened in Afghanistan, or what happened with the debacle and the withdrawal in Afghanistan, where the troops were left? How did you explain that with Joe Biden's leadership?
Mr. Secretary,
how did you
I'm not
explain that to the
asking you
Marines
about
that
the
didn't get
previous
medals,
administration.
that we restored their medals because of that
Mr.
disastrous
Secretary,
withdrawal in
I'm asking
Afghanistan?
about
Did you
what's
explain that to your
happening right now.
constituents when Joe Biden was asleep at the wheel and he had an AWOL
Okay, Mr.
Secretary of
Secretary,
Defense?
how
I don't
about
think you
this
did.
next post? How can I explain this next post to my constituents? I'm Jewish, so this doesn't really bother me, but my understanding is that this is quite offensive to many Christians. So how do you explain this post?
I'm not here to explain posts. We have an incredible commander-in-chief who
Mr.
puts our
Secretary,
troops first. I'm here for a budget hearing about our troops.
This is
a historic
about
budget that's giving
our
it a
troops.
chance to defeat
Mr. Secretary,
our adversaries.
Mr.
And President
Secretary,
Trump is
please,
doing that
this
in
is my
world-class fashion.
This is about
Gentlelady
our
has reclaimed
troops.
your time, Mr. Secretary.
This is about our troops. This is about who is commanding our troops and if our troops can trust that they are being sent into harm's way under good strategy. The mental stability of our commander-in-chief is deeply important to our troops. It's deeply important to this country. It
wasn't
our
important to you
troops'
during Joe
lives at
Biden.
stake. I'll remind you that when there were concerns, Democrats came together and he was not our nominee for president. So I encourage you to have the same courage that Democrats had.
But Hegseth says, Donald Trump is the sharpest commander-in-chief we've had in generations. Play this clip.
So, Mr. Secretary, you are with the president a lot. And it pains me to even have to ask this about our president, but my constituents' lives are at stake. Do you believe that the president is mentally stable enough to be the commander-in-chief?
Did you ask the same question of Joe Biden for 4 years?
And the SPLC is fighting back. It is demanding the transcripts. It is exposing the lies. It is refusing to be silenced. Stay with USA Press because we are not done. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Share this video right now because the stories we are covering tonight are the stories that determine whether the America that King Charles was praising still exists by the time his next visit rolls around. And now to James Comey, because the King's speech and the SPLC indictment and the Comey case are not separate stories. They are chapters in the same book. We covered the indictment in depth in our previous report, but today we want to place it in the context that this week demands. James Comey, fired by Trump in 2017 while his bureau was investigating Russian interference in the 2016 election, indicted by the Trump DOJ last September on charges that were subsequently thrown out by a federal judge who found the prosecutor was illegally appointed, and now indicted again over a beach photograph. Responded to his second indictment with 5 words that deserve to go down in history. He looked into the camera on his Substack channel and said, "I'm still not afraid. Let's go." That is the posture of a man who understands what is happening to him and has decided not to let it break him. Charles, in his speech, spoke about the triumph of light over darkness. Comey, in a video recorded under the shadow of a federal arrest warrant, embodied it. The Comey case is important not only for what it represents in terms of individual persecution. It is important because of the pattern it reveals and confirms. The Trump DOJ has now brought charges or pursued investigations against James Comey, former FBI director, against Letitia James, the New York Attorney General who pursued civil fraud charges against Trump, against Adam Schiff, the California senator who led impeachment proceedings, against Fani Willis, the Georgia prosecutor who indicted Trump over his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, with the DOJ now subpoenaing her bodyguards, against the Southern Poverty Law Center, which tracked hate groups that supported Trump's political movement, against every person and institution that dared to say no to this president. The Department of Justice, which is supposed to be the guardian of equal and impartial law in this republic, has been transformed into a personal enforcement apparatus for a man who once stood trial in multiple federal and state courts and whose defense against all of those charges was ultimately political rather than legal. Comey said he believes in the independent federal judiciary. So does King Charles. The question is whether the independent federal judiciary still believes in itself. Let us turn now to Britain itself, because the diplomatic backdrop to this state visit contains a story of its own that illuminates the extraordinary difficulty of navigating a relationship with the Trump administration. While Charles was in Washington delivering his speech about checks, balances, and the sacred weight of a nation's word, the British Parliament was consumed by a political crisis involving Peter Mandelson, the man Prime Minister Keir Starmer appointed as UK ambassador to the United States in late 2024. Mandelson, a veteran Labour politician and longtime Washington operator, was appointed to the most important British diplomatic post in the world under circumstances that have now exploded into a full parliamentary crisis. The former head of the UK Foreign Office, Philip Barton, testified before the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee on the same day as the state visit, and what he said was damning. He told the committee that he was not consulted on the appointment. He was told to process it and get it done. He expressed concern before the appointment was finalized that Mandelson's known connections to Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex trafficker, could become a problem. Those concerns were brushed aside. He said he was presented with a decision and told to get on with it. Starmer's former chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney, separately admitted to lawmakers that recommending Mandelson had been a serious mistake and a serious error of judgment. He apologized to Epstein's victims for the hurt the controversy caused. This is not a minor political scandal. Mandelson has a connection not only to Epstein, but, according to parliamentary testimony from former senior officials, retained an interest in a Russian company connected to Vladimir Putin after the invasion of Crimea, a detail that was present in the due diligence material the Prime Minister reportedly saw before making the appointment. The former permanent secretary of the Foreign Office testified that Downing Street placed the Foreign Office under constant pressure to rush through Mandelson's security clearance, showed a dismissive approach to the vetting process, and made clear that refusing to grant clearance would have damaged US-UK relationships. That last phrase tells you everything. Britain was so desperate to be in good standing with the Trump administration at the start of his second term that it fast-tracked a man with Epstein connections and possible ties to Russian financial interests into its most sensitive diplomatic post. And when that unraveled, when the details of Mandelson's past became public and Starmer was forced to fire him in September, the damage was already done. Starmer, as of April 28th, narrowly avoided a formal parliamentary inquiry into his conduct. The House of Commons defeated the opposition motion to trigger a Privileges Committee investigation, meaning the Prime Minister will not face the kind of formal scrutiny that could, under British parliamentary convention, become a resigning matter. But the questions have not gone away. The testimony is on the record. The pressure on the Foreign Office is on the record. The security concerns are on the record. And the image of a British Prime Minister so anxious to please Donald Trump that he bypassed normal vetting procedures to appoint a scandal-ridden friend of Epstein to the ambassadorship in Washington, that image sits just beneath the surface of the gilded, ceremonial warmth of this state visit. Which brings us to the Iran war, because if you think any of what we have covered tonight is disconnected from the conflict currently raging in the Middle East, you have not been paying attention. While Charles was addressing Congress about the importance of alliances, of keeping faith with partners, of steering away from inward-looking nationalism, Trump was simultaneously managing, or attempting to manage, a war with Iran that has already destabilized global energy markets and brought the world closer to a major regional conflagration than at any point since the Gulf War.
Mr. Secretary, Joe Biden is not the president. Mr. Trump has been president for a year and a half, and I'm asking you
did
right
not.
now.
And I won't even engage with the level of disparagement that you're putting on the commander-in-chief, who indeed is. Meeting
Mr.
him
Secretary,
every single day.
Mr. Secretary, Biden is not the president.
Sharpest, most insightful commander-in-chief we've had in generations. And you want to compare, you want to ask that question after you and your fellow Democrats defended Joe Biden, who could barely speak and didn't know what day of the week it was.
As you know,
he governed through an auto pen.
When
he had a Secretary of Defense who went AWOL for a week. I can't
Mr.
be gone
Secretary,
for 10 days, for 10 minutes.
I will reclaim my time. Thank you so much.
Gentlelady's time. She's reclaimed.
There was some other line of questioning also to some of the other individuals at that table that's worth pointing out, like when the Undersecretary of Defense, basically the comptroller, wouldn't answer if he had signal, and then General Kane said that he had signal on his phone, but wouldn't say, but then he wanted to change his answer. Well, maybe I have it on my personal. I don't know if I have it on my military. Like, all these people are so freaking compromised. Play this clip.
Mr. Hurst, do you have signal on your phone?
I'm sorry, why is this relevant?
Do you have signal on your phone?
What does this have to do with the budget?
I'm going to take that as a yes. Mr. Kane, General Kane, do you have signal on your phone?
I do, sir, yes.
Okay. So I want to talk about signal. Last year, the Secretary and other administration officials discussed sensitive and almost certainly classified information about a strike in Yemen using the unclassified Signal app. Mr. What's the current policy for Signal on official DoD devices?
I'm the comptroller. I don't do CIO work.
So therefore, it is allowed? Is that your statement, that it is now allowed to have Signal on your device?
Mr. Whiteside, my statement is I run the budget for DoD.
Yeah. Okay, well, he's got it on his phone, so therefore it must be permitted.
Sir, I got to go back and look if it's on my official phone. I was talking about my personal phone. I'm not exactly sure. I'll go back and look, though.
Okay. Last month, FBI Director Kash Patel made a public announcement that Russian hackers are targeting Signal app users in the government, specifically stated they were targeting individuals of high intelligence value, including current and former U.S. government officials. I hope that it is not official policy that you can have Signal on your official phones, and I would love to get a response from the department on that.
And then Secretary Hegseth said he was the one who terminated the investigation into the Apache helicopter pilots who fly Kid Rock around. Seems like on a daily basis now, these Apache helicopters are with Kid Rock. So demented, so deranged, so corrupt. Play this clip.
An investigation was launched by the 101st Combat Aviation Brigade Command Leadership, but before that review is completed on March 31st, you terminated it via social media post. Did you personally direct termination of that review?
I did.
Okay. Now, the president said they probably shouldn't have been doing it and that I'd take a look at it. So did you talk to the president before terminating that review?
Well, I don't relay what I talk about with the
president. I think unfortunately that means that you did talk to him, which in turn means that you've just confirmed that the president himself overruled the leadership of the 101st Airborne. Mr. Secretary, you yourself have affirmed repeatedly the need for higher standards and higher accountability at every level of your agency. Commanders rely on established processes to uphold these standards. How does canceling a command-initiated review by the 101st Airborne leadership support a culture of accountability? Actually, I think I'll ask that of the chairman.
Sir, back to my earlier comments about the importance in my role of staying in the middle. What you're alluding to is, in my assessment, with deep respect for your ask, is a partisan question, and I think it would be inappropriate for me to answer that.
Sir, I actually don't think it is. I think it is actually a very fundamental principle of accountability in our department, and I think it was the wrong decision. I'm going to close by just saying one thing. Mr. Secretary, you started this hearing by politicizing it.
There you have it, folks. Let me know what you think. Hit subscribe. You may think that you're subscribed, but double check that you're actually subscribed and help us hit 7 million subscribers.
The Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/5 of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas normally flows, has been effectively closed since the war began on February 28th. Iranian ports have been under a U.S. Navy blockade since April 13th. Oil prices have surpassed $112 a barrel. The UAE, one of America's closest Gulf allies, announced this week that it is withdrawing from OPEC, a seismic shift in the global energy order driven directly by the chaos this war has unleashed. Iran has proposed a deal that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz while leaving nuclear discussions for later. Trump rejected it. He posted an AI-generated image of himself carrying an assault rifle in front of exploding mountains with the caption, "No more Mr. Nice Guy," and told Iran it had better get smart soon. His administration told reporters it was studying whether to keep the naval blockade in place for months, regardless of the economic pain it causes globally. Peace talks that were scheduled to resume in Islamabad were canceled when Trump abruptly ordered his envoys not to board the 18-hour flight. He told reporters he was conducting diplomacy telephonically. The War Powers Act deadline, requiring congressional authorization for a military conflict that has exceeded 60 days, is arriving at the end of this week, and Senate Republicans are publicly acknowledging that the president will need to either seek that authorization or explain himself to Congress. Senator Susan Collins put it plainly, the president has to obtain congressional approval or Congress can block it. Those are the two choices. This is the context in which King Charles spoke about Ukraine, about alliances, about the weight of America's word. Because Trump's approach to the Iran war is the same approach he brings to every international crisis: impulsive, performative, transactional, contemptuous of the institutional frameworks that have governed international relations for 80 years. He claimed at the state dinner that Iran had been militarily defeated and that Charles agreed with him about nuclear weapons. Charles, as a constitutional monarch, cannot publicly contradict the President of the United States. But anyone who listened to what he said in Congress, anyone who heard him speak about unyielding resolve, about the cost of abandoning allies, about the danger of nations becoming ever more inward-looking, understood that the King of England was not endorsing Trump's approach to the Middle East. He was, once again, and in the most diplomatic language available to him, warning against it. We are living through a period in American history that will define this country for generations. That is not hyperbole. That is the assessment of historians, constitutional scholars, former intelligence officials, and, as we have now seen, the reigning monarch of our oldest and most essential ally. King Charles III did not come to Washington to offer comfort or validation. He came to deliver a message. He delivered it with grace and precision, with humor and historical authority, with the weight of 800 years of constitutional history behind every word. He spoke about the principle that no one is above the law. He spoke about the value of free and diverse societies. He spoke about the obligation to defend democracy when it is under attack. He spoke about the Christian faith as a call to compassion and peace rather than a banner for division and cruelty. He spoke about the word of the United States, meaning something in the world. And on the same day he spoke, the Justice Department was indicting the Southern Poverty Law Center on fraud charges for the crime of fighting hate. The same DOJ was executing a second indictment against James Comey for a picture of seashells. The FCC was threatening to revoke the broadcast licenses of a television network because a comedian made a joke about the First Lady. Peace talks with Iran were being canceled on a whim. And across the Atlantic, the political fallout from Britain's desperate scramble to please this administration was consuming its parliament. The mirror Charles held up was clear. The reflection was unmistakable. What we do with what we see in it, that is the work of every citizen, every voter, every person who believes that the America being described in that chamber still exists and is still worth fighting for. This is USA Press. We are here every single day doing this work because it matters and because you make it possible. If you watched this to the end, please like this video right now, leave a comment telling us which part hit hardest for you, and share it with everyone in your life who needs to understand what is happening in this country. Subscribe to USA Press and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. We are not going anywhere, and neither, it seems, is King Charles's message. It is going to echo for a very long time.